Thank you. Good morning.
Maybe we can switch between.
And do I apologize for my English? Because I have only 20 minutes. I go. Okay. The title of my paper is "We Have Nothing in Common on the Mechanism of Creating a Sense of Belonging." What makes for effective and powerful change in a struggle for emancipation or in a protest for the recognition of one or more rights when carried out by a collective movement or a group? How can the strongly oppositional, critical, antagonistic stance against the power that be, when adopted by a group of individuals, be affirmed in the public arena as a moment of political identity, as an experience of creation, institution, as the form of an organizing power in view of a different and more democratic order, both in state and politics? How can we answer these questions? First of all, I would like to do here is certainly not provide an analysis or a response that is strictly political, since I'm not qualified to do so. My intention is rather to move towards problematizing in a radical way the topic which lies at the basis of these questions, by attempting to investigate the conceptual and theoretical mechanism that make a plural subject's protest or claim concrete in its quest for justice and equality in the face of a growing and likewise concrete or real inequality. What I hope to be able to show here in my talk, through comparing Balibar's and Blanchot's work, is that the hypothesis of a plurality can affirm equality in the midst of inequality, not because it is compacted or formed on the basis of equality, constituting a unified, homogeneous whole of identity, for example, we, the women, but because in its difference, indeed because of this very difference, it contradicts this very equality, or rather, the universality of equal rights, and by contradicting it realizes, implements, and establishes it, thereby making itself a fundamental subjectivity, an authentic political subject. Anthropological differences, the multiple differences between humans and inhumans in this sense, would not constitute an obstacle to the process of universalization of the subject and of citizens' rights, but the mainstay for the citizen to become a subject, indeed the horizon for the creation of an authentic political community as a system of equivalence without a general equivalent. Such a community, as Balibar emphasizes, in order to be the form under which the universality of the subject, the multiplicity of differences specific to being human, and the recognition of vindication of rights are all held together, is a community which, quote, cannot be thought, therefore, either as particular or absolutely universal, not as deriving its rights from rights of an anthropological character, nor as ignoring the latter in the name of transcendental equivalence of all the ways human subjects have of relating to one another, nor as fixing the differences in categories, classification, hierarchies, or castes, unquote. In their irreducible nature, impossible to reduce to a single measure or canon, the differences show that the contradiction of exclusion and excluded is what allows the universality to verify and manifest itself as such. In this sense, the differences do not represent the particular as opposed to the universal, but a dislocation at the heart itself of the universal. Such a difference, Balibar specifies, does not so much denote the difference between individuals, but rather the regional lack of symmetry in relations between individuals, through which those same individuals fulfill both themselves and the human. This means thinking of human and community not in terms of appropriation, identification, incorporation, or fusion, but as an experience essentially of exteriority, of relations which as such impedes all stability, all continuity, all fixity in one of the diverse and plural identities. Quote, In its individual modalities, never reducible to a single model, anthropological difference is therefore not only the place of identification and normalization, it also the place in which originate uncomfortable overturnings of power, dislocation of belonging, counter-identifications, and invention of alternative norms that Foucault calls counter-conducts, unquote. The relation between humans, externalized in relationships, overturns and transforms, therefore, the way in which the human and its fulfillment are understood, and even transform the way of conceiving the being in common, beyond both the model offered by the dialectics of intersubjective recognition and the canon of sovereign subject. For Balibar, the main reference point of this subversive theoretical strategy is represented by Marx. It is well known that Balibar proposed to refer to Marx's early materialist philosophy as an ontology of relation, and it also well known that he intended to activate in this expression all its fundamentally oxymoronic sense, in that it wouldn't allude so much to the fact that the essence of being human lies in relating or being in relation to, from a perspective that tends to historicize and de-essentialize the concept of human and tends to make relation the fundamental categories for understanding the real, but more to something that would turn the idea of human essence into its opposite, thereby leading to a new idea of social relations. Indeed, when Marx writes that human essence is not an abstraction that inheres in each individual, but rather the whole of social relations, not only does he transform the notion of man, revealing that the human is essentially social, but he also affirms the social in the symmetry of its relations as the condition of possibility for each individual existence and a modus of its ideal universal realization. For Balibar, the aporia of the Marxist formula, a formula which proposes an equivalence between the idea of human essence and social relations in a context that aims to discard once and for all any substantialist or essentialist definition of the human, can be sustained if one thinks in a radical way of the fact that the human only exists in the plural. In what does such a radical position consist? Not only in believing simply that the human is given by a plurality of irreducible singularities, a homogeneous plurality, but that this plurality in turn pluralizes itself, so to speak. In other words, it splits, differentiates both inside and out. So we are looking at a plurality which contradicts itself the moment it is established, which withdraws all possibility of sharing the moment it places itself in common. Relation is as a placing in common, which ultimately does not have nothing in common, which experience continually the interruption of this commonality. I quote, "Social relations, in a strong sense, are those which, holding humans together and preventing their isolation, also create their irreducible difference, in particular, distributing them among the various classes. This doesn't mean that these distributions are stable or eternal or coherent. In other words, social relations are always internally determined as differences, transformation, contradiction or conflicts, which are sufficiently radical so as to leave only the heterogeneity which they create as the common. Thus, a different way of intending the universal, the common, and their relation is outlined, a way of thinking that has a universality which is effectively inclusive of differences, all differences, and that recognizes the important role played by the latter in the constitution of belonging. It's only because there is nothing in common among men, and only because what is in common among men is the absence of commonality, that some such thing as an intensive universal, because continually in tension, aporetic, and hence continually revocable, continually open over its own in a human abyss can be deployed and effectually operative and operating. The relation between men is therefore a relation built from and in infinite difference, in the interruption of their commonality. Not by chance, Balibar refers to Blanchot in this regard. The latter also attempted to glean a way of thinking of relation that could withdraw from dominion of unity and the supremacy of the subject. Indeed, Blanchot speaks of a relation between men, not in terms of unity, unification, and continuity, with the consciousness of overturning the usual and the reassuring ways in which we have always thought in relation to the other. Blanchot reduces these ways to two basic types. The first falls under the law of the same and of a unity, and thus demands that separation be annulled, the difference be reduced to what is identical in order to affirm the truth and fullness of all and of the subject. The second aims to bring about the same unity through the identification or confusion of the I with the other. It's undeniable, however, as Blanchot recognizes, that every time we speak or think, we always do so in virtue of such a unity. It would even be absurd to claim to have done away with coherent and comprehensive thought once and for all. Nevertheless, the effort must be toward seeking to think of the other without necessarily having recourse every time to the categories of one and the same. So it will be a matter of imagining a third relation beyond the horizon represented by one and being. What does the relation that withdraws from the sovereignty of the one look like? The relation not reduced to the measure of one becomes multiple, without number, always implicated in the possibility of not being determined and so of being indeterminate, subject to the fluidity of continuous dislocation that compels the I to come out of its place and its role and to make itself, I quote, a nomad and anonymous subject in a space abyss of resonance and condensation, unquote. In this relation, the I and the other are neither separate nor distant. In the absence of the power of the one, every measure is cancelled, and therefore every spatial collocation of the poles of relation too. What is in fact missing is the criterion for placing here and there, for seeing and quantifying the distance. Instead, the terms of relation are reciprocally extraneous, an extraneousness that can no longer be defined as either separation or distance, and so should be defined, according to Blanchot, as interruption. There is thus nothing given between men, neither a God nor a word, nor a nature, if not the pure evanescence and fragility of that between. Without doubt, the range and consequence of this theoretical gesture are remarkable. Above all, what becomes of man from such a perspective? I quote, "Man is the most distant thing from man, in that he is present as irreducible distance. In this sense, he is farther from him than he is from the outer limits of the universe, or from God himself. This also means that such a distance represents what, from man to man, eludes human power, which can do anything. Where my power ends, where possibility does not exist, there relation is designated, founded in the world on pure luck." Unquote. The other, with which one is in relation, places itself beyond my reach. Its extraneousness cannot be assimilated to that of an object, nor to that of nature, nor even to that of reality itself, which I can subjugate to my power at any time, including it along the horizon of my representation. Nor is its extraneous that of a personal order, which distinguishes among men, considering them in their interchangeability and therefore exposes them to the connection of common values. Such extraneousness is that which comes from men, from the other, that is, in that it is man. As a result, for Blanchot, only man appears along the whole spectrum of reality as decentered. Not only does he escape from the cage of my perspective, but he is himself without his own horizon. The third kind of relation, therefore, set up a relationship without unity and without equality, in which it is not possible to hypothesize any communication, whether subjective or trans or intersubjective. If the other speaks to me, he does not do so as I would, whereas if it's me who speaks to him. I address someone who has no collocation, who is suspended in a caesura which cancels the vision of both duality and unity. Hence, the between of this relation is the repudiation of any consistency of being. What Blanchot's gesture seems to inaugurate is a radical questioning of the others, and their consistency of being. The third kind of relation demystifies any reduction of the others to a subjectivity, without, however, turning him into a mere object as a result. With the others, it makes no sense even to ask who they are. Now, the absence of a measure for such a relation not only means that the other can never coincide with me, but also that I can never coincide with the other. Just as the other is one another for me, so am I another for him. Yet here, Blanchot warns, we mustn't intend this doubling of no reciprocity in a dialectical sense, since that would end up leading the relation to inevitable fulfillment in the sense of its affirmation as full unity and equality. It is the subtraction of any measure and any unit which prevents the playing field of the symmetry between the I and the other from becoming a homogeneous field of equals. There is not just a single dissymmetry, there is not just one plan of discontinuity, but rather, I quote, "I double dissymmetry, a double discontinuity, as if the void between the one and the other were not homogeneous, but polarized, as if a non-isomorphic field were formed, containing a double distortion that was both infinitely negative and infinitely positive, as well as what we could call neutral, while specifying, however, that the neutral doesn't cancel out, doesn't neutralize this infinity of a double sign, but contains it like an enigma," unquote. At this point, the question, who are the others, inevitably gives way to the question, what becomes of the human community, since the others must respond to a relation of extraneousness between man and man, a relation without measure, indeed always in excess. The other is merely the name affixed to something without a name, something which is completely other in that it is other, and which at a certain point in the language game is designated with the word man. In the experience of the world, in which one responds to a relation of impossibility and extraneousness, one experiences that man is absolutely other, and that this other does not let us think of it in either transcendental or immanent terms. The other is this man. It is what pertains to man, even if it is just to put him in parentheses or inverted commas. The other, not as God or nature, but really a man, more other than any other thing. The other pertains to man and displays both the personal power of the subject and the power of the impersonal. It is the mystery of the neutral which eludes the question of being and the question of all. The third kind of relation is therefore a neutral one for Blanchot, in the sense of a relation in which the one is never comprised in the other, in which the two terms of the relation itself do not form either a binomial or a unity. They are reciprocally extraneous, yet without being able to claim any privilege, indeed reinforcing the symmetry and the discontinuity between them. It is as if, even while giving themselves up to the relation, the terms implicated in it aspire to distance themselves from this very same relation, separated from it by an infinite distance and difference that can never be bridged or reversed. What is created with this relation is, for Blanchot, an infinite dual separation. The third kind of relation is the relation of extraneousness, of separation between two terms, then separate themselves from this very separation which holds them in relation. In the relation itself, the two terms tend to offer themselves as distinct and different from the relation. The other at stake in this relation, then, is not just one of the two terms, since it is the relation itself between the two that requires this movement of even infinite separation. This Blanchot's strategy recalls Balibar's operation, consisting, as we have seen, in the possibility of achieving a community without a transcendental equivalent. What these two thinkers seem to share is the intention no longer to recognize in the other something which a common measure, the belonging to a common space, maintains in a relation of continuity and unity with myself, thereby reducing its singularity. The relation instead forms in the separation the interval, the interruption, and to the word in Blanchot's case, and to the political vindication in Balibar's case, does not fall the task of eliminating this anomaly, but of containing it as a dislocation, keeping it as such without saying, absorbing or normalizing it. Sustaining the aporia, living in the dislocation given by the differential of subjectivity, does not mean fatalistic resignation to a time of silence and passivity, but rather opening oneself up to an authentic transformation of man and of his access to the universal that can truly take difference on board. Thank you.